recording. And then I'll tell you when I'm in. All right. Whenever you want to do the intro, we can
Alrighty.
go right ahead.
All right.
Gotta clear the throat.
Can't hear that. Okay. Oh. All right, Katie, I gotta film a video. Gotta give him one last pet. He's been warming all day. All right. All right, you ready?
Yes, sir.
What's up, everybody? It's Gavin here with NBA Real Talk. I'm with my boy G here from Super Mario Hoops, and we're gonna do something real special today. We're gonna do something that I don't think has really ever been done before. You've seen lists, you've seen names mentioned, but there's never been an all-NBA ringless team or an all-NBA ringless draft. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go over the best ringless players of all time, so that's players who never won a championship, according to a few small criteria. So A, if it's a current player, it's got to be someone who's at least 30 years old, so they're on the back end of their career. We're not going to or any of the young guys who still got a lot of cracks at winning it. So it's got to be you haven't won a ring and you're at least on the back end of your current career, or we're going to pick some stars from the past who may have been injury riddled or kind of had a tragic, midlife crisis to their career or a tragic end to their career. We're going to allow those players to be in the draft under the premise of it being their prime. So basically, the greatest players to never win a ring, who might currently be playing on the back end of their career or were robbed of being great due to injury. So, Garrett, how you doing today, man? You ready to do this?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah. I'm ready.
That's what I'm here.
Yeah. So I guess I will be making the first pick because the last draft we did, you did take the first pick. So with my first pick, now I know, at least in my head, who I think is the best ringless player ever. However, I don't think I'll pick him. I think at least for, win a championship, you need a guy who can orchestrate the offense for one. You need also shooting in today's age, but a guy that can also play the traditional style of basketball. And so because of that, all those things considered, I'm going to go with one of my favorites of all time, definitely a top 5 ringless player of all time. And my first pick, I'm taking Steve Nash. I think you can appreciate that as a guy from Canada. So, yep.
Now, be honest. Did you know that was going to be my first pick?
I kind of had a feeling. Obviously, like you have the I guess like Canadian connection.
Not just because he's from Canada. You knew that I would think how valuable he would be to a team like this, right? Obviously, you share the sentiment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, that is my second favorite point guard ever. And I will say my favorite point guard is on this list, so wouldn't be surprised if I end up with him as well.
No, for all the reasons you just mentioned, he was going to be my first pick. Plus, being Canadian to boot. But, for a ringless team, you think about, the most selfless, sort of perfect guy you get to run and orchestrate that offense. Mm-hmm. You really can't pick a better name than Steve Nash.
And there's a few guys too that I would say maybe have better careers or higher on an all-time list, but I'm trying to win, I feel like this guy in his career, he should have a ring if you ask me, if it weren't for Robert Horry. So
okay. So I pretty much know who my second choice is for that first pick. But since he probably I was like, he would be my backup if I had gotten the. I should have rock paper scissors. I was like, no, you pick first because I think last time I was like, I remember I was thinking about this for days. Like, there's no way he'll pick Steve Nash. There's no way he'll pick Steve Nash. But in this case, because we're going with prime and we're going, we're imagining we're not worried about the injuries. We're not worried about any of that kind of stuff. Kind of a unique pick here. I'm going to get him on the board early. I'm going to go with Yao Ming. Because a lot of people don't remember that, prime Yao. And I know prime Yao, we're basically talking, barely 2 seasons because he was so injured in and around it. But Prime Yao was a pretty, I won't call him an unstoppable force, but he was a great combination of skill and size. And I think I can put him reliably as a centerpiece of my offense. And just because, as we were taught before we went on air, that the list is a little bit like forward/center light. There's a lot of guards and forwards on here, but not power centers. So I'm starting it off with Yao Ming only because I pray you're not going to pick the other guy I had in mind if I couldn't get Steve Nash. God, I never thought you'd pick Steve Nash. Oh, that makes me so upset.
Well, it's crazy you picked Yao too, because as much as I talk, like Yao is my second favorite player ever, and he's my favorite
Oh,
center
really?
ever. Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
So, and I was gonna pick him eventually, but I didn't think you'd pick him this early. So, dang.
Yeah. Yeah, like
Tough.
Yao's a guy that kind of like I think people just forget, like, because he was so injured, and like most people acknowledge, like, yeah, he was kind of good for a minute, but like people kind of like, if he had never run into the problems he had, we're
Mm,
probably talking about a guy who would have gone down as one of the greatest centers of all time. I mean, he is
yeah.
in a sense, but just sort of in a celebrated sense, like he statistically easily would have been one of the greatest.
And probably could have won a championship in '09. It wouldn't have been
Yeah,
on this list.
yeah. All righty. So, it's my pick, right, for the
It
second
is.
round.
It is. We're switching them
Okay,
all.
so might be a semi-obvious choice, but I am going to pick for my second pick, someone from Jordan's draft. I'm pretty expected to probably go early in this, and since we're talking about prime, you can't go wrong with Charles Barkley. You know what I mean? If we're talking prime Charles, he's going to do some damage down low. He's going to want to win. We keep him off the 3-point line and just keep him inside and keep him banging down low, banging bodies, as he likes to talk about. I think Charles Barkley is excellent to sort of to really bring some brute force to my front court.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a valid pick, and I was actually considering him uh, for the top spot as well. But I just, I figured maybe Steve Nash. You need a guy who can definitely run the offense and everything like that. But as you said, there are not a whole lot of great front court players. Um, and that's why my next two picks are going to seem a little weird considering I already picked Steve Nash first, but I also want to build some chemistry. I also want to have two guys, I want to have guys that have shown they can get there, have shown that they can get all the way to the championship. And maybe if it weren't for the greatest player of all time, they both would have shared a championship. And that's why I'm going to pick the duo of Karl Malone and John Stockton right now at 4 and 5. Yeah.
Oh,
It might seem a
see,
little crazy, but I have now two playmakers. I know Steve Nash maybe on the defensive side wasn't too great, but John Stockton definitely can hold his own. And I mean Karl Malone, I would say probably skill wise is probably the best ringless player. But I didn't want to say that because we all know the narratives around Karl Malone. So
yeah, not a desirable person,
yeah,
but
not a desirable
great
person.
basketball players are great basketball players.
And so for
He's
that
an
reason, I'm gonna have
undesirable human, but
actually
he's still great on the court.
for that reason I'm gonna have Stockton as my fourth pick, and Karl Malone can be my fifth pick.
Okay, so you stolen my two first choices for point guards. Because like, oh, there's no way he'll pick both Nash and Stockton. So
I had to act
I wouldn't
fast.
call this. I wouldn't quite call this burning an early pick, especially with how much like overall talent we've got on the board. But because I feel like now that you've picked those two guys that were going to be like my field generals, funny enough, I don't even know if I would have picked him almost at all had things gone more my way. But I got to think. I think I got to go with a prime ball because I need a floor general, and
Okay.
whatever criticisms you have of Chris Paul, they call him the point god for a reason because that man is an extension of the coach on the floor, and he really can run an offense and run a team. And rest assured, I'll be getting some lobs up there. And we all know Yao. You can just hop up there and put him away pretty easy. So, funny
Yeah.
enough, for only my third pick, but I'm going with Chris Paul.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. I know obviously we all troll Chris Paul with the CP0 names and stuff like that, but I think I would say behind Steve Nash, he's probably the second best point guard on this list, even better than John Stockton. But the reason I picked Stockton there is because him and Malone got the chemistry, so I think things will also go well for me too.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean you've already clearly, obviously, you're on the right path. If you've stolen my first two names that were like on my mind, that like I have to pick these guys. They're a good shot. You probably won't pick them early, and here you are picking them early. So, is it still me?
It is still you with the seventh
Okay,
pick.
so now and once again, we're going prime. So it could be such a toss up between two players, Trace McGrady or Vince Carter. I'm erring on the side of Vince because we're talking about prime and we're also talking clutch. And Vince Carter is about as clutch as they come. Through all his trials and tribulations of his career, I can rely on him to hit a shot. And what the playoffs, we're talking about ringless, players. So pretending it's a playoff game with a bunch of ringless players, you want someone who's going to be able to hit big shots. And Vince Carter is probably one of the best names on this list for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely not a bad pick. I think he probably would have, at the very least, gone in the next like 5 or 6 picks, probably even for me, like in total. So not next like 3 picks. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a pretty good
Well, it's
pick.
interesting because we're putting the caveat of like at their best, and
Mm,
at their best, like prime of his career, Vince Carter is like an all-time great playoff performer in that little window. But you know what
mm,
I mean? Like
yeah,
those early 2000s with Toronto against the Sixers, him and AI going back and forth with 50s. You got a gamer in Vince Carter for that.
yeah. No, I definitely agree. That was a good pick there. But for me, I think my sixth pick or my eighth pick, it is the round four. I got really 2 point guards, but I think they're capable of playing one and another right next to each other. If not, I could alternate them. And I got a power forward in Karl Malone, so I might need someone who can catch and shoot off the ball. I might need some perimeter defense. I might need an interior defender, and I think I'm going to go with that interior defender. Quite possibly the best center on this list on an all-time scale, at least. And I'm gonna go with Patrick Ewing.
I was hoping he would stay on the board a little longer. I was definitely going to add him to the list. Very good pick.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, I think he's probably. I think when people think of ringless guys, he's probably top 5 ish in that category. But I
Definitely
mean, if it
top 10.
yeah, I mean, if it weren't for John Starks having like the worst shooting choke job ever, he probably would have a ring. So
Mm.
yeah,
All right. So I'm
pick
going to be. Oh, wait.
nine.
It's still you, right?
Yes,
Yeah, you
yes,
got one more.
I got pick 9, and then you got
You're
10 and
about to
11.
take my pick that I thought I was about to do.
We will see. If he's a small forward, then I might. So my pick, probably like on an all time scale, maybe not the best small forward, but I also want someone who can, space the floor. I want someone who can like create his own shot, maybe be our go to scorer. This guy he won on a lot of levels, but he just couldn't win in the NBA, unfortunately. And maybe if he got drafted 1 pick higher, he would have been on quite a dynasty of a team. I'm gonna go with Carmelo Anthony.
Fair pick. Fair pick.
2 Knicks as
You
well.
know, similar to Vince, through all his trials and tribulations, you can't deny that guy was a shot maker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And on an all ringless team, I think he's going to have some space to work and do his thing, right? So, not a bad pick at all. Okay. So, to further beef up my front court and kind of get most of that out of the way, again, because we're talking prime, I feel like I need someone for CP3 to toss some lobs to. Now, an obvious choice might be Blake Griffin, but I'm going to opt for, because as amazingly athletic and explosive and awesome as Blake Griffin was, I think a player who was a little bit better overall and definitely had a better run of being competitive on a competitive team is Amari Stoudemire. So I'm going to throw Amari into my front court selections. And
Okay.
then I'm basically going to go, funny enough, I'm picking him this late. I'm picking Allen Iverson. Just because, you know what? We're here. We're about 5 rounds in or so. It's like, I don't want to leave him on the board too long. And the thing about AI is that his level of speed, he could easily, any list you put him on, he might be the fastest person on that list. You know what
Mm.
I mean? He might be the guy who runs the most miles on that list. So I got AI there to just basically tire out your defense.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. I mean, um, I like the Stoudemire pick. I think that he definitely fits well with CP3. And then Iverson, I probably would have picked him by now had I not gone the Steve Nash and Stockton, like for the backcourt kind of thing. But because I did do that, I do want to maybe get like a true two, or a true shooting guard. Someone who maybe can get their own. Um, I'm also kind of looking at some defenders, but you know, maybe this guy wasn't known too much for his defense by any means. However, I think he can get his buckets probably with the best of them. He can space the floor. So if we're playing in this era, I think that helps me well. Um, and again, he can definitely pass the ball. I'm getting a lot of guys who can move the ball. And right now, I got Steve Nash could be a flashy passer. John Stockton could be a flashy passer. And this guy, maybe not quite as good as them, but he's definitely in the same conversation as them when it comes to that. And he has one of the best handles of all time. I'm going to go with Pete Maravich, Pistol Pete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, good choice. Good choice. I was wondering if he would like. I was like, "There's no way neither of us would end up picking him by the end of this." So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Had to go with him. It's one of my guys as well. Of the I guess like old timey players, he's probably like one of my favorites. So
Yeah,
yeah.
me too.
Um, Now that puts me in an interesting situation for this next pick. And maybe I think what I'm gonna go with is this guy was maybe also a scorer, but he's a little bit more athletic. He's a little bit better, like in terms of versatility, more of a defensive minded guy than Pete Maravich. And instead of being more so like a 1-2, he was more of a 3. And I think having him along with Carmelo Anthony, I think combined both these guys were scoring champions. I think combined they had like 4 or something together. But I'm gonna go with the Iceman, George Gervin.
Mm, very nice, very nice. Was he a 2 or a 3 or no longer?
I think it's more like a 2-3.
Yeah.
Like I think they both did play 2, but
Yeah.
Pete also is like more 1-2.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All righty. So we in round 6,
We are in round 7, and I believe we're
7.
doing 15, correct? So we're halfway there.
Yes, 15 per side. Okay,
All right.
so I'm going to go with a pick that, if you never picked him, obviously he'd end up on my list at some point. Only because the list is so talented that it took this long. But I'm going to go with Grant Hill because we're talking prime, and that guy was dang near a walking quadruple double. I know he's going to be willing to do whatever it is that I need from him on the court. So he's my utility guy. He's my LeBron before LeBron guy. He's out there to pass the ball, shoot the ball, rebound the ball, and drive the lane.
Yeah, it's a solid pick. I like it.
And then I'm going to probably this will be um, the final pick to really solidify my center spot. A surprising pick. Everybody hates him. I'm definitely one of those people who hates him. He's definitely earned the reputation of being hated so much, but I think he's a great player, and I think he's a great villain, and I know he's the guy that can get your team off their game. And I'm talking about no one else but Joel Embiid. I'm throwing Embiid in there because you know what? He's a nasty guy. He's got talent. He can play defense. He was an MVP, the year before this. And I just think I can't go wrong, I can't go wrong having him, in my front court. He can either start, come off the bench, but wherever I put him and whatever his role is, he's going to cause some trouble.
That's a great pick. That was going to be my next pick.
I couldn't believe he actually lasted this long. I think he just lasted this long because everybody hates him.
I literally had in my mind, I'm like, he's going to be my next pick. So that's unfortunate. Um, so I guess I'm going to have to look for another center. Luckily, there's still a few left. Now, there's maybe not as many offensively skilled centers, or any offensively skilled centers as Joel Embiid. Um, but I think I'm going to go with another guy who was an elite defender, an elite shot blocker, and he even every time he blocked a shot, he'd even remind you, and that's Dikembe Mutombo.
Yeah, great pick. I definitely would have taken him at some point if he was left on the board for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking in my head, I'm like, if you did pick Embiid there, which I really didn't think you were going to, um, but you did, so I had to react with Dikembe Mutombo.
Yeah, no, that's a great pick. Basically, the reason I opted for Embiid, I was like, he's probably not as good of a defender as Dikembe, but he's got the defense offensive thing. Whereas Dikembe was a respectable offensive player, but nothing to write home about. So,
Mm,
I thought, it's an all NBA ringless team. I'm gonna take the guy who's got the most talent on both sides of the ball.
yeah. And with my other pick, I got a center. I do have I guess a true two. I have two true threes, and maybe George Gervin can even play some of the two. Um, but I think, you know, I'm stocking up, I guess, on the guards, but maybe another guy that can play the one and the two. I just want a lot of playmakers. I want a lot of guys that can create for one another. Um, and especially this guy, maybe when you think of ringless guys, especially currently, um, he probably gets the most slack for not having a ring of current players. But I think at his prime, people were comparing him, saying maybe he's a top 3 shooting guard ever. Not a lot of people agreed. I didn't agree with that. However, I think he's somewhere up there, maybe like 5, 6, somewhere in that range, and that's James Harden.
Mm-hmm. Okay. See, I thought about James a little bit, but to me, he's just too much of a choke artist. I don't trust him.
I will say, in all fairness, none of these guys ever got it done in the playoffs.
Exactly.
So,
I mean, yeah, there's some
yeah.
irony to
I mean,
calling him a choke artist.
in a lot of other situations, I would definitely understand that, but I do it. Obviously, there's some guys on here that had maybe even worse chokes.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, and that's what I mean. James Harden is so talented. He's so good.
Mm,
There's basically like there's just got to be that thing or whatever that's kind of like, nah, I can't. You know what I mean? Because it's almost like, well, why aren't you picking him?
mm,
It's like it's not like he can do everything when it comes to offense, right? He can score, he can pass. You know what I mean? He can get
mm,
the lane. He's probably when we always that term thrown around about offensive players that are on a roll about how they're unstoppable. For that period with Houston when he was putting up the MVP numbers and stuff, he was one of the closest things to an unstoppable player we had seen in a while. Partly because D'Antoni just said, "Hey, go out there and shoot 33s a game if you want," but still, there was a point there where it's just like, what can you do? You know what I mean?
right.
And Kobe say, "Well, that ain't going to work in the playoffs," but at the time, even he had to say, "What he's doing right now is unbelievable." So really not a bad pick. And this year on the Clippers, when they acquired him, even though I was wrong, I remember we chatted earlier in the year. I said, I mean, it'd be silly not to think they're a favorite. You know what I mean? Even with James Harden's history and Russell Westbrook struggling, you got that much talent on one team. So,
Mm,
yeah, I mean, I think at this point he's a very safe pick to put onto your team.
yeah. No, I
Okay.
agree.
So what I think I need now is I need a little bit of grit. So I'm going to go with Jimmy Butler because playoff Jimmy always rises to the occasion. So I
Okay.
need that little bit of grit and just a guy who I can throw in 1 through 3, right? He can play pretty much any position in the backcourt.
Okay. Not a bad pick.
And I'm going to throw in with him. Oh, who was I going to pick? a sec. Oh, Derek Roy. I'm gonna pick prime Derek Roy before the knees gave out because I don't think he even. When we talk about prime Derek Roy, there's an irony because I don't think he ever even hit his prime. Same with Grant Hill or Derek Rose or a lot of other guys on this list. But even prime Derek Roy, which isn't even necessarily what prime Derek Roy would have been, the way Kobe would talk about him and the way other players would talk about what he was doing and the energy he was creating there in Portland, I think he's prime Derek Roy. I think we got a special player on my team there.
You mean Brandon Roy, right?
Oh, did I say? Sorry, Brandon Roy.
For a second, like I didn't know if you were picking Brandon Roy or D Rose, and then like
Brandon Roy.
when you
Brandon Roy. Yeah,
yeah
I was combining two people.
yeah
Brandon Roy. Did I say
I
Derek
figured
Roy the whole time?
you're
Okay.
saying
Brandon Roy of the Portland Trailblazers in the mid 2000s. That's who we're talking about.
okay. Well, now I also know who you're also looking at. Um, no, but I think I was going to pick, the other guy who you kind of alluded to right now, anyways. And that's gonna be my guy. I'm gonna take Derrick Rose for this
Yeah.
pick. So,
Yeah.
favorite player
No,
ever.
yeah,
Uh,
can't go wrong.
yeah.
Can't go wrong.
MVP, youngest MVP, and the thing about him too is like a lot of these guys on here. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of them, but there's a great deal of guys on here that when they get to the playoffs, like they kind of shrink. He's one of maybe the few on here that like when the playoffs happen, he actually rises from his regular season form. So, I think that definitely helps me. And yeah, if we're trying to win a ring, like if this is the finals matchup, my team versus your team, I want to try and get as many guys as I can where it's like they at least like elevated in the big moments. So
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure. That's why I went with Jimmy. I mean, Jimmy's a pretty, he's a good but pedestrianly good player during the season.
yeah,
And it's not like he puts up unbelievable numbers in the playoffs, but the way he rises to that occasion, the way his numbers jump, you're like, that's just going to do phenomenal things for your team.
for sure. And for my next pick, I'm kind of, I got a lot of guards, I got a lot of wings. Might need another big here, and I'm thinking like a power forward because I really only have Karl Malone, and especially with guys like Nash and Stockton and um, Pistol Pete, D Rose, um, Harden. Like I got a lot of guys who maybe like to throw some lobs, and who better to catch a lob that's left on this list? Well, I guess there's another guy too that could, but I'm gonna go a little bit more old school than the other guy. I'm gonna go with Sean Kemp.
Oh, cool. Yeah. No, I was hoping Sean would be there because I was like, and based on the other guy, I assume you're talking about it, I was like, I think I'd go Kemp over Griffin. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, it was close, but I left the other guy on the board because I don't know. I mean, he was teammates with Chris Paul, so if you want to take him,
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, he wouldn't be a bad pick, but at this point, with him, we're in what, round 10 or 11 probably?
we are in round 11, middle of round
Okay.
11, because I just
So
made my pick for
if
that.
we're in round 11 and this guy's still on the board, no matter what my team looks like or how I'm trying to construct it, I don't think there's a chance if we're talking about primes that I can leave Tracy McGrady on that board for any longer because you're talking about one of the most natural scorers to ever play the game, one of the most talented overall players to ever play the game, Mr. 13 points in 33 seconds. Like, you name it, this guy used to be able to do it, and he was just so smooth. Um, I just, for him to still be on the board at round 11, like the idea of leaving him on that board, I know he never made it out of the first round. Not really his fault. He definitely underperformed in a few of those series, but there's a few of those series where he truly gave everything he could and they just couldn't make it out. So, despite, I guess we could say T-Mac is kind of like my James Harden pick for my team. You pick James for yours. I'm not saying they're directly comparable, but both immense offensive talents that led the league in scoring. Multiple MVP candidacies. I think T Mac is my guy that just put the ball in his hands and see if he can score. he's about as good a chance as anybody.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of part of it. Like, I think when I picked Pistol Pete and Harden so close there, I was eventually, if McGrady was still there, I was gonna wrap back around to it. I just felt like I had too many like similar players, you know. So I was like, if he's available late, then I'll pick him up. But I mean, obviously, he should have been picked up probably by now, anyways. So
Mm-hmm. And it's still me going into round 12, right?
correct, yes.
So the list is definitely interesting now. What we have to pick from. So, you know, I could pick one guy or another and justify it, but I'm torn up between guys like Dominique, even Joe Johnson's crossing my mind. But I think I'm actually gonna go with Bernard King.
Okay.
Just an old school guy, one of those old school players I know, whose name I know, who I remember. Just I think he's just a good pick. I can't really elaborate too much more than that, and just think, at this point, this many rounds, if he's still on the board, I could take him.
Yeah, and I mean, to get a guy who was a scoring champion that late too, it's pretty rare. I mean, I can't really like just looking at the other names here. I mean, I see like maybe like one. I think that was a scoring champion, but that's about it.
He's basically I remember he's a legend. I remember seeing his highlights. I'm like, I feel good with that pick, even from what little I know.
Yeah, it's a good pick. I can't say too much bad about it. Although obviously as someone who was looking at the small forward position, I was contemplating him. And now I'm looking at two small forwards, actually three. Um, but I'm not gonna take one of them just because I feel like he's too much. He's too much of a dropper even for this group of players in the playoffs. So I just can't consider him really all that much. But I think I'm gonna go with who you mentioned a little bit in the last one there, and I'm gonna go with Dominique Wilkins.
Mm-hmm.
So that
You
is
get
my
Patrick Dunks.
12th pick. Yeah, I mean, had to get some athleticism. I mean, I know maybe he's not like an all-class defender, but compared to this list, maybe pretty good, I would say.
I feel like every few years I randomly find out yet another team that Dominique Wilkins played for that I was just like completely unaware of. Because you just associate him pretty much with the Atlanta Hawks
Mm,
and maybe a little bit of Celtics, if you know. But then,
mm,
man, it's like he actually played on a little small handful of teams that I was completely.
yeah. No, I agree. And my pick for round 13, I'm honestly a little surprised he's still on the board. Because I mean, this guy is probably, off. If we're talking offensive talents, he's one of the best on this whole list, even including the people we've picked. I'm gonna go with Damian Lillard.
Mm. I was eyeing him. I thought about it. I just thought I had enough guards. And I love him. He's one of those current jerseys that I still don't own that I've been planning to for a while. But yeah,
I definitely have a lot of guards on my team, but I feel like it's just too. I feel like I couldn't forgive myself if I left him on there.
yeah. Well, he's about to be 30. Is he 34 right now?
I think he's 34. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's 34, 35. I mean, he's still got some years left in him, but that window really is closing for him to, pick one up here at the end of his career.
I mean, we will see. Maybe next year he could remove himself from the list. He's got maybe a few
Yeah.
more chances.
No, I hope he gets one. I definitely hope he gets one. Okay, so I was definitely eyeing some Joe Johnson because I'm thinking about that guy who can hit a big shot and who is a consistent scorer. I'm not really going to go with Paul George, very talented player, but just as much or more so than James Harden. I don't really trust him. You know what? So I'm torn between a couple players from sort of opposite sides of the court positions, but I think, again, with some strategic idea here, I'm actually going to draft Russell Westbrook.
Okay.
Because between him and Iverson, the amount I will be having your team chasing my team literally around the court in circles that's got to add to the fatigue. You know what I mean? And on a team like this, I think I can maximize again. Prime Russell Westbrook, prime Russell Westbrook's, triple doubleness. You know, I think I can really get a lot out of him on a great team. And I got some good centers and some good forwards who can rebound the basketball. And I got a couple big, small forwards. So I think he could do some damage on my team. And I'm hoping you don't pick the other guy that I had in mind too.
I mean, we'll see. Um, Although you do have another pick before I.
I do have another
Yeah.
pick, and that's the thing is I don't know whether I'm going to use it on the other guy I'm thinking, or if I need to be more strategic. So, yeah, whatever. We're going to do it now. Actually, Chris Webber. So Chris Webber can hit a shot around the key. Great passer. Just a solid offensive talent and good enough on defense to have him on the court at any key moments. And it's funny because most people who never win a championship, you think multiple conference finals or an NBA finals appearance or something. The Sacramento Kings were more than likely, not for sure, them and I don't want to say the year exactly, whatever year Robert Horry body checked Steve Nash. The Suns and the 0-2 Kings are two teams that didn't make it to the finals, but looked like teams that probably would have won had they made it to the finals and didn't make it for, we'll say, potentially nefarious reasons.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think both those teams should have a championship. Yeah. I will say though, I am a little glad you did pick Chris Webber, and it's not because I wasn't gonna pick him. It's actually because I was thinking of picking him, and that's weird to say, but it's because I was thinking between him and one other guy, and I probably couldn't forgive myself if I didn't pick this other guy, but I just maybe thought Chris Webber was slightly a better fit on my team. But now that you picked Chris Webber, I'm going to take the other guy instead. Um, he's also a forward, but maybe a little bit smaller. But I think at his peak, he was one of the highest volume scorers we've seen in NBA history, and probably could defend at a pretty high level, at least compared to a lot of these guys. I couldn't forgive myself if I left him on the board, and I got to go with Elgin Baylor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, I felt like maybe Chris Webber would have been a slightly better fit on my team, but once you picked him, I said I'm gonna go with Elgin Baylor.
Yeah. No, I feel you.
And then for my
Not the guy where
last,
he's on the list, but he is. So list.
yeah, um, and for my last pick, there's a lot of enticing players on here. I remember I did a whole separate video for Alex English one time. Joe Johnson, that's my guy. Lenny Wilkins, I met him. Dave Bing, I almost met him. and But you know what? I'm gonna go with it, and I know pretty sure he's the youngest player actually on this list, and probably barely made the cutoff. But I'm gonna go with Donovan Mitchell. Might seem crazy, but look at everybody left on this list, and he is probably actually I would feel confident saying he's the biggest playoff riser of everyone remaining.
Is he 30?
He is 28, I believe.
Oh well, we'll allow it. Okay, he's the one guy who made the cut. Yeah.
He's the one guy who made the cut.
Yeah.
But since he is here, I think honestly though, the thing that makes him part of the list, and I think even why I considered him originally, is that I don't know if he will get one. He's just in such a weird spot in Cleveland that it seems
Interesting.
it seems like it probably will not happen, which sucks because I think he is like a championship level player. This is a guy who's like top 7 all time in playoff points per game. Literally just matched an Allen Iverson record from like 20 something years ago for game 6 and 7 this year. Has had how many 50-point games? I think only MJ and Wilt have had more in the playoffs. Like he has all time level numbers in the postseason, even in the regular season. But I just don't know if he'll ever get one, and it's kind of unfortunate because I do think he's a championship level player that's just gotten screwed.
Mm-hmm. No, I feel you. Yeah, for sure. And you know, if your team beats my team, he'll be the controversial pick that throws a little.
Honestly, he
Throw,
he
throw,
probably will just be right in the sideline. He will be filling the
yeah,
water cups,
doesn't
but
matter.
yeah,
He's a
I
he's
had to
a
pick him just because I
anomaly
give
on
him
this
some
list,
praise.
and that's all that I need. But fair enough, because you know what, you picked an anomaly off the list, so that gives me an extra pick. Are we round 14?
This is round 15. That was my last pick, so this is
Okay,
your
so
final
round
pick.
15.
Yep.
Okay, so this is my last pick, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I I've been viewing the list. I've been tossing it up. I've been kind of thinking, well, do I want to like power up my front court? Because obviously, adding Blake Griffin to what I got would just like add a element of power, like beyond measure. So there is a temptation to go with a prime Blake Griffin because that guy was pretty nasty. But I'm going with Drazen Petrovic
I like it.
because he was a reliable shooter, and I think um, everything about from who he is and where he comes from and the kind of guy he was, combined with just a little bit of that unorthodox style, even though that was more of the time. Obviously the more European players have come over since then, but just that little bit of extra, um, you know, guesswork that my opponent will have to do with him on the court. And I just think he's reliable to make a shot. So, you know, I could have picked, if I want a reliable shot maker, I could have gone with someone like Mullen. If I want a big time shot maker, I could have gone with Joe Johnson. But I thought Drazen is just, he's reliable.
Yeah, and I'm on the record saying I think he's, a lot of people probably wouldn't say this, but I think he's the fourth best shooter ever, behind Curry, Ray, and Reggie. Because I think there is a little bit of a gap there, but like people say Clay, Kyle Korver, Larry Bird, but I actually do have Drazen at that spot, so I think that's a good pick.
Yeah, yeah. But I just think, again, he's reliable. So I can't remember what his percentages were, but I know he had some. Didn't he have one year where he shot over 40%? I think from three.
I think he was like 40, like 45 or something percent or
Yeah,
46.
yeah. He had one like ridiculous year and a decent. And yeah, another one case of a guy who his prime might not have even been his prime because rest in peace, he was taken too soon. But them's the breaks when you're making an all-time greatest to never win a ring type of list. You're gonna have some tragedy in there, and I think if I had him on my team, he could possibly be that last missing piece I need to get me over the top.
Yeah, and actually, I think he is the fourth highest all time in 3 point percentage. So
Wow, I
yeah,
did not know that. I knew he had like a really good one. I did not know he was fourth all time. That's insane, especially for that era. That is insane.
and he also like, I mean, there's a few other guys up here, but like he was even taking like more threes per game than a lot of these other guys too. So yeah, I mean, that definitely a good pick. I can't complain or anything about it.
Yeah. All right. So we got our teams. So I guess who do we leave on the board? That's basically who's left over there, eh?
Yeah.
Uh, just talk about that a little bit. I mean, Paul George, it was
Yeah.
kind of a given he'd end up left behind. I think.
That's who I left when I said I was going to take Dominique, and I was like, I'm thinking between three, but I'm not going to pick this one. Like,
Yeah, like I mean, PG, to an extent, I won't even think it's a bad rap because he's done like he's played well at times in the playoffs. He's never played great. That's the problem. You
mm,
know what I mean? He's definitely played bad. He's played well at least half the time. I know he had a couple good games that year. They went to the conference final or the semifinals, about quiet whatever year that
yeah,
was. Maybe, no, they made the conference finals, didn't they?
conference finals. Yeah. Mm,
I can't remember the year they beat the Mavericks. I think they went to the conference finals,
yeah.
the second round or third, wherever they ended up. He did a solid job carrying the team, but like he wasn't playing like out of this world or anything. So
mm,
I just thought, no. Joe Johnson was kind of surprisingly tough to leave off the list because he was
Yeah.
always kind of sitting there thinking, Prime Joe Johnson, not only was he good, he was a shot maker. You know what I mean?
I
There's a
think
reason he's still killing it in the big three today, isn't he?
I probably would have picked him had I not gone with Donovan Mitchell there at the end. I probably would have taken Joe Johnson because he also was someone who lived for the big moments. So
Yeah. I saw a thing recently. I think it's like, was he drafted by like the Celtics or something?
yeah,
Wherever he was,
started there. Yeah.
yeah. So he was drafted by them, like traded pretty quickly, and then I think last year or something, or during the COVID season, maybe when players would get sick, and there was a bunch of those random 10-day or 2-week contracts,
Mm.
and he signed one of those with the Celtics, and it was like the longest period of time between a player playing for a team twice. You know what I mean? Like he was
Hmm.
playing at the very beginning, and then like 20 years later, he ends up on them again. So that's pretty cool.
And the only player
Chris
from the
Mullen,
big three to play in the NBA
yeah,
after that. So.
Chris Mullen, great role player,
Mm.
great shooter. Um, but I wouldn't say not in a negative way, but I'm not surprised he didn't make either of our teams. Blake Griffin's a bit of a surprise to think that by round 15, neither of us could find a reason to draft him. Especially on a list that, like I said, seemed kind of like more like top three heavy and not so much power forwards and centers.
Hmm.
So I thought he would just inevitably, almost by default, make it onto one of our lists.
Yeah. I think as well, like with and with Blake Griffin, like I was thinking about him. I think with the Sean Kemp pick, I think that kind of like solidified. I probably wasn't going to take him, but yeah. I mean, along with that, I mean, I think there's just so many guards. That there were some that it stunk to leave off, like Dave Bing, another one, Lenny Wilkins, another one, um, and probably a sleeper, but like I would say Lou Hudson. Um, I know not a lot of people maybe like know too much about Lou Hudson or like give him the
I
credit.
barely know him.
But I mean, he was like a mini magician. He was like money in the mid range. Also a guy who probably had like sneaky hops. There's not a whole lot of footage of him available on YouTube, but there are a few games of his. I recommend people go watch that because he was pretty good and a very fundamentally sound player. Um, and then the other two that I was thinking of because I really like you said, not a whole lot of bigs, but because of that, Artis Gilmore and Walt Bellamy. I think those were the other two. This man Walt Bellamy averaged like 31 as a rookie.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Then Alex English never made it onto either of our lists either. So
yeah, it was just a
that's
weird fit I think for our
yeah.
teams.
But I mean, there you go. There we have it. I think we went over. I would say the best ringless players of the list that we could comprise of. I would say anybody, if you watch the video, comment below if you think there's anybody we left off the list who deserve to be on it. Um, None really come to mind off the top of my head. There could have been some almost obscure names that never did anything great in their career. Say like a DeMar DeRozan type or a Sharif Abdur-Rahim or sort of these random players who had like pretty solid averages for their career and made some all-star teams. We could have thrown some players in like that, but other than that, I think we mostly you, but we came up with a pretty good list and this was cool because you've seen a lot of top 10 lists with there. You've never really seen like what is the greatest like list of players truly to never win a ring. And I think we made a pretty good all-star game out of it. And they should all get a ring at the end, a participation ring. No, they would hate that.
Yeah, that now they'd hate it.
Yeah,
Also,
none of these guys from any of these generations want anything to do with participation rings.
yeah,
And maybe Joel Embiid,
I could actually see that. Um,
just to piss people off.
yeah. Shout out also to Connie Hawkins. I forgot to mention him, but it's another guy that we left off there that I felt like it was tough to leave him off. But
Yeah, we had to make some last minute edits to the list, and it's one of those things. It's like packing for a trip. You're forgetting something. You're forgetting somebody. It's gonna be something obvious or something that's gonna come to both of us in the middle of the night tonight. But I think we did it pretty decent justice, and I'm pretty happy with the teams we created. So make sure those are displayed on the screen so everybody knows exactly who we picked. what the team look like, what the matchups look like, and let us know below who you think, which team you think is taking it. Team Super Mario Hoops, Garrett's team, or NBA Real Talk's team. You let us know in the comments below whose team is winning. This was an awesome video. Really appreciate it. Any final thoughts?
Nah, man, I think it was pretty good. Like you said, I think I shout out really to all these guys, even though they didn't win a ring. I guess like they're moral champs. Uh,
Yeah,
but yeah, I don't know. I think all these guys are really talented players, and pretty sure all of them are in the Hall of Fame as well. So, I mean, to get into the Hall of Fame as well and not like maybe have that same success in the postseason, I think that shows how good you actually are.
yeah, and like it means you went up against the Malone and Stockton, guys like that. Like they don't have the ring for a reason, and it's not necessarily them. You know, guys like Malone and Stockton, or even guys like AI to an extent, because the Lakers, even though he only got there that one time and never really got close, but like had he been facing anybody else, probably would have won one. So just remember, yeah, championships definitely add to your greatness, but I would say a lack of them, not all, sometimes it can, but a lack of them doesn't always detract from your greatness, especially because a lot of guys, it was just bad luck and things like that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe below. Check out Super Mario Hoops channel as well. He's got great content going on there, and we'll probably do some more drafts in the future. So comment that below if you have any ideas for a draft for us. I was thinking about a one-ring draft, but we'll get to that somewhere down the line. Until next time, this is Gavin with NBA Real Talk, signing out with my man Super Mario Hoops. We'll talk to you guys next draft.
All right.
Dope, man. That was fun.
Nice.